This dollar right here, what if I told you it's slowly losing value every single day? Not because you spent it, but because of decisions made far away from people you've never met. Inflation isn't just a number, it's a force that determines whether you can afford your next meal, your home, or even your retirement. And today I'm going to show you exactly why it happens, starting with a simple story about a deserted island. Imagine you and 99 other people are stranded on a deserted island. You all decide to stop bartering and create an official currency. Let's call them island bucks. You print exactly 10,000 island bucks and distribute them evenly. Each person gets 100 bucks. You now have a functioning little economy. Prices for food, shelter, and services stabilize based on supply and demand. But then, Governor Jerry thinks, you know what? Let's print another 10,000 island bucks and distribute them. Now there's twice as much money on the island, but the number of goods hasn't changed. What happens? The purchasing power of each buck drops in half. This is inflation, when the money supply increases faster than the goods and services it buys. If there were 10,000 bucks in circulation and now there's 20,000, the value of each buck drops by 50%. Prices go up and your savings, they're worth less. Here's the kicker. This is exactly what happens in the real world, except our economy isn't a closed system, which makes things a little trickier. Most people think the government gets all its money from taxes, but that's not the full picture. When taxes aren't enough to cover spending, and you and I know they never are, our government raises money another way, selling bonds. A bond is basically an IOU. When you buy a government bond, you're lending money to the government in exchange for interest over time. Investors, whether they're American citizens, foreign governments, or big institutions, hand over real money, expecting to get paid back later with a little extra. So technically, selling bonds is not the same as printing money, but there's a catch. If the government borrows too much, or if investors stop buying these bonds, the Federal Reserve, our central bank, often steps in and buys them itself. But where does the Fed get the money? It creates it out of thin air. This is when borrowing turns into money printing. The Fed is effectively injecting new dollars into the system, just like Governor Jerry did on the island. This is when bond sales become inflationary, because instead of moving money around, new money is being created, and that's when things start to unravel. And here's the scary part. There's a tipping point. If the government prints too much money, trust around the world in the dollar drops. If people start believing their money is going to lose value fast, they spend it ASAP, which makes inflation skyrocket. Look at what happened in places like Venezuela or Zimbabwe. When money printing got out of control, people stopped trusting their currency. Prices doubled, tripled, and eventually a loaf of bread cost millions. Now, the US isn't Venezuela, but if we ignore inflation, if we keep printing money to cover our debts, we're walking a very fine line. The moment people stop believing in the value of the US dollar, it's game over. To slow inflation, the Fed raises interest rates. This makes borrowing money more expensive, meaning people and businesses spend less, cooling off the economy. But raising rates too much can trigger a recession. It's a delicate balance. Tighten too hard, you crash the economy. Do nothing, and inflation spirals out of control. Now, inflation is a hidden tax. It goes from your savings without you ever voting for it. And while it's caused by a mix of factors, one thing is clear. If we ignore the principles of money supply and debt, we risk destroying the very thing that keeps our economy stable. Now, history shows us that great civilizations don't collapse from war alone. They collapse when their money loses value. The question is, will we learn from history or repeat its mistakes? By the way, this is an extraordinarily complicated topic, and I did my best to boil it down to its basics. Stay curious and question me. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to learn from you. If you found this valuable, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. Do you think inflation is being handled correctly in the United States? Let's get the conversation going.